My name is Tracy Holton, and I will be introducing Ball State University SPCE 611 Group Replication Project for Eastern Standard Time, Group Number 2. Our group selected the study using token reinforcement to increase walking for adults with intellectual disabilities by Krentz, Miltenberger, and Valbuena. The purpose of this study was to evaluate the effectiveness of token reinforcement on increasing walking. An AB-AB reversal design was implemented at an adult day training center in Florida. 5 adults with mild to moderate intellectual disabilities walked in a covered corridor. No tokens or praise was given during baseline. During the intervention phase, staff provided a token for the participant to place in their personal bag for each lap walked. Tokens could be exchanged for backup reinforcers, which were determined by preference assessments. Staff recorded number of 50-meter laps walked on a data sheet. The inter-observer agreement was 99.6% to 100% for all participants. Based on the social validity questionnaire, both participants and staff, they found the walking program fun, successful, and easy to implement. Token reinforcement resulted in a substantial increase from baseline in laps walked for 4 out of 5 participants.
The purpose of this study is to evaluate the effectiveness of token reinforcement for increasing the distance of walking in adult participants.
My name is Tracy, and I'm 42 years old, and I walked at 2 different local parks or my backyard.
My name is Kira Clement. I'm 24, and I walked in neighborhood roads located in Noonan, Georgia, and in Grotto Falls in Gatlinburg, Tennessee.
My name is Amy Brown, and I'm 49 years old, and I walked in neighborhood roads located in the North Georgia mountains in my neighborhood.
My name is Grace DeLuca. I'm 24 years old, and I did my walking in neighborhoods in Miami, Florida.
My name is Kara Driscoll. I am 26 years old, and I walked in neighborhoods, a local park, and a shopping mall.
Walking requires no special skills or locations and can be performed by almost all of the population and carries very little risk of injury. The benefits of walking are well documented for physical and psychological reasons. The Mayo Clinic wrote in an editorial about how aerobic exercises reduce fatigue and anxiety and improves mood as well as social relationships. Fodley, 2017, Laskowski, 2016 agreed that walking contributes to a decrease in heart disease, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, stroke, back pain, some cancers, and obesity.
For the next supporting literature, I did my article on the effects of item preference and token reinforcement on sharing behavior exhibited by children with autism spectrum disorders by Gilly and Ringdale, 2014. For this supporting literature, I'm focusing more on the methods and results from Study 2, since this component of the research study focused more on utilizing the token economy-based system. For Study 1, there was 4 participants who originally participated, whereas in Study 2, only 2 of the original participants continued on. The Study 2 design was an AB withdrawal design, A standing for the baseline and B standing for the token economy, and it was utilized to evaluate the level of promoting required to share the high preference items. The baseline and treatment phases were conducted similarly, other than the fact that the treatment phase included the use of tokens and a token board. The objective was to have the tokens delivered to each participant contingent upon independent sharing with a highly preferred item. The Study 2 results were that Susie engaged in independent sharing at 100% of the intervention trials, whereas Ben engaged in independent sharing at 80% of the intervention trials. These findings from this study correlated with other literature utilizing a token-based economy interventions that geared towards improving socially appropriate behaviors produced by children with ASD.
For the third supporting literature, ALSA 2012 examined the effects of a peer-administered token reinforcement on jump rope behaviors of elementary physical education students. The participants in this study included 10 third-grade physical education students. An alternating treatment design was used to evaluate the effectiveness of the token economy. 2 phases were included, a baseline phase and an intervention phase. Similar approaches were utilized for the baseline phase and intervention, except for the introduction of a token economy. Each student paired up with another student, and one was assigned to engage in jump roping, while the other student counted the total number of jumps that were performed. The students were directed to jump for 30 seconds and were then given a break for 30 seconds. This pattern continued for 5 minutes, and then the students switched positions. When the token economy was introduced, the partner rewarded the student during every 30-second break. The student received 1 token for every 10 jumps they performed. Once a week, the students were able to exchange the tokens they earned for backup reinforcers. The results of this study indicated that 9 out of 10 participants had an increase in the total number of jumps performed when the token economy was implemented. These findings illustrate that the utilization of the token economy can be an effective procedure for increasing various types of physical activity.
The purpose of my study was to look at the effects of the token economy on 2 different schedules of reinforcement. There were 10 participants. There were 7 males, 3 females, all ranging in age from 18 to 24. The baseline was each participant had to ride a stationary bike for 20 minutes, and they calculated their RPMs until a steady baseline was achieved. During intervention group, there was a group that did the fixed interval schedule, and they were 10% above the mean, with a total of 20 tokens being available. On the variable interval schedule, the rate of tokens delivered were completed by the participants before the baseline phase and after the intervention phase. The results showed that all participants showed a performance improvement, but the ones that were on the variable interval schedule, their intrinsic motivation either stayed the same or increased, but the ones that were on the fixed interval, it either stayed the same or it decreased. So it showed that the variable interval schedule showed a better performance improvement overall.
The final supporting literature was also by Oslot 2015, The Effects of Peer-Administered Token Economy on Second-Grade Physical Education Students' Overhand Throw Performance. The participants in the study were 7 second-grade students. The intervention took place in their physical education classroom, and an alternating treatment design was used between baseline and token economy phases. The students were partnered up at the beginning of each session, and during the baseline phases, the partner would mark on a piece of paper if the participant correctly did the 2 steps to an overhand throw. For the intervention phase, a token was administered by the partner for each correct throw. Video recording was used for IOA for this study, and it showed 91.8% agreement. Results showed an increase in accuracy as well as distance of throws. And also the PE teacher who was involved in this intervention found it to be highly favorable.
Walking is defined as any occurrence of movement of the feet at a slow or moderate pace. This involves an alternating motion of picking one foot up off the ground and moving it in front or behind the other foot. Walking can be in a forward or backward direction. Each of us collected data using measurement of frequency. This was done by counting how many 50-meter laps were walked in 1 hour session. And here is just an example of our data collection table that we all use.
For the materials, we either would use a smartphone or an iPhone, depending on if we had an Android or an iPhone. And then we would download the Map My Walk application, which we utilize to collect our data collection on. Any of the participants could use either a timer, such as a watch, their smartphone clock, or the Map My Walk goal set for 1 hour. We would also require that every participant utilized walking shoes and appropriate exercise clothing in order to prevent any unnecessary injuries. We also conducted a reinforcement survey in order to determine what our motivators would be for our highly preferred items as well as our lower preferring items. Then we would notify each other about the location of where each person would be walking, and we could also view this on the Map My Walk application using the GPS locator. Then we would have 2 pockets or Ziploc bags for storing the tokens, and then we would have 100 small plastic tokens or paper clips. And then we could use actual or visual representations for our individual prizes. And then after everything is done, we would share all of our results in a Google document as well as in Excel in order to record our laps that we walked by each participant. Then for the design of this study, as you can see, we did an AB design, which is baseline treatment. And we did the baseline for 1 and 2, we would walk for 1 hour. And then the intervention 1 and 2, we would walk for 1 hour, but providing a token for every lap we walked. Tokens are then exchanged by participants for individual rewards. That could be anything from coffee to pizza to chocolate, just really whatever each participant was working for is what we would use as our rewards.
Okay, so the baseline part of our study was each participant chose a location to walk for 1 hour sessions, and we used the Map My Walk app to measure. After we were finished with our initial walk for the first baseline phase, we would take a screenshot of our results, and then those results were put into a Google graph, and then we were shared with each other at meetings during Google Hangouts. So the baseline procedures were that participants, So the baseline procedures were that participants would get to their destination each day, and they would text, "It's a good day for a walk," to each person. Once they were there, they would push the button on the Map My Walk app to start the walk, and then they would walk for 1 hour or until they could no longer continue. Once they completed their walk, they would push the button to stop their walk and then take a screenshot of the distance and duration. Once again, that duration and distance was recorded on a Google spreadsheet, and then we shared all that information via text and also during our meetings on Google Hangouts.
Prior to intervention, each participant completed a motivation assessment to determine the priority of their favorite treats. Each participant would travel to their predetermined walking location. Before beginning the walk, the participant would remind themselves that they're earning tokens for each 50-meter lap and can earn preferred items. They would then walk for 1 hour until they could no longer continue. The participant's walk was measured and saved within the app so other group members could view each other's walking session. The Map My Walk app was used to track the distance and later converted into number of 50-meter laps. Each participant earned 1 token per 50-meter lap walked. Each individual participant could then select from their personalized reinforcement menu and use tokens to acquire a reinforcer or save tokens for more valuable reinforcers. And here are some pictures of some of our favorite reinforcers.
For our inter-observer agreement, we used the Map My Walk application, and it gave us the ability to see each participant's sessions via screenshot. It also recorded the distance and duration for each participant. We calculated our IOA using a total count IOA, and this was done for 30% of our sessions, and they were randomly selected for selection. This is some of the sample screenshots that the app shows. So you can see each person where they walked, the distance, and the pace also. So this is how we actually calculated our IOA. The first picture shows a screenshot of the data that you could see in the app. So you can even go back in and see previous recorded data. And then the second screenshot is what Kayla recorded for her data. Comparing those two, we use the formula of participants' data over the data recorded by the app times by 100 to get our IOA. Using this method resulted in 100% IOA for the 30% of available sessions that we had for Map My Walk. The treatment fidelity was maintained for a majority of our steps. We had 13 steps in our procedures. 10 of them were implemented correctly for the majority of our participants. We did have 3 steps that were not implemented directly. Our first one was the texting each day to say it's a good day for a walk. This happened for the first few sessions, but we drifted off and didn't continue every day of the study. Our second step that we did not follow was carrying the physical tokens with us. What we did was calculate how many tokens we got after we walked. And this caused steps 3 and 5 to not be followed because those steps required the physical tokens. However, the motivators were still calculated and received afterward. Additionally, we had one participant whose Map My Walk application was not working due to their location. And for this participant, she used her car to measure her laps and then took data manually.
For Tracy's results, my first baseline range was 39 to 70 with an average of 61. During the first intervention, my range was 74 to 96 laps with an average of 86.5. Second baseline was very similar to the first with a range of 43 to 72 and an average of 61.75. Even though I only had one walking session for the second and final intervention, the range and average of 86 was almost identical to the first intervention phase. Token reinforcement resulted in an average of 24.87 laps increase from my baseline versus intervention.
For my first session, the data point represents a 0 because I was not cleared yet by my physical therapist to participate in more strenuous activities yet. However, from my first intervention phase through my second baseline, and then also my second intervention, my data was fairly stable, which leads to the analysis that even without tokens, I maintained my consistency. My first baseline ranged from 0 to 69.2 laps with an average of 45.27 laps. The first intervention phase increased to an average of 117.64 laps, ranging from 98.6 to 123.8 laps. The second baseline had an average of 122.2 and a range of 119.2 to 126 laps. The final intervention phase ranged from 122.2 to 140.4 and averaged at 103.36 laps.
Looking at my data, my first baseline range was 99 to 102 with an average of 113 laps. When the token reinforcement was implemented for the first time, my range was 109 to 153 with an average of 137 laps. My second baseline phase showed a range of 59 to 105 with an average of 39 laps. The final intervention phase was similar to the first intervention and had a range of 118 to 139 with an average of 132 laps. Overall, the implementation of the token economy increased my laps walked by an average of 31.5 more laps.
Okay, so my data shows that my baseline mean was 40.7 with a range from 0 to 66. The first data point was a 0 because I was sick and could not walk. The first intervention mean was a 62.8 with a range of 62 to 64. My second baseline mean was a 59.3 with a range from 58 to 61. And my second intervention mean was a 61 with an intervention range from 60 to 62. So my data clearly shows that the token economy did increase my walking only slightly, but not to where I would say that it was a successful intervention.
My first baseline ranged from 48.4 to 56.4, and the mean was 52.1. My first intervention showed the most significant increase to a mean of 86.5, and that range was from 80 to 93. The second baseline had a mean of 42.8 and a range of 32.4 to 56 laps. And my final intervention phase ranged from 53.4 to 77.2, and this one averaged at 63.1. There's a clear increase in the number of laps between phases 1 and 2. However, my final 2 phases were more unstable, and they had an increasing trend across baseline 1, baseline 2, and treatment 2. Overall, the number of laps did increase in the token economy phase by an average of 29 more laps. This chart shows our results compared to the original study's results. As you can see, all of our intervention phases did increase our walking. Amy's intervention was the slightest increase, as well as if you compare it to Elton in the original study, they had similar results showing only an increase in a few laps. The rest of the participants in both our study and the original study showed a more significant increase. Overall, our objective was to determine if implementing a token reinforcement was an effective way to increase walking in adults. Our group was able to replicate the original 2016 study with very similar results. The overall token reinforcement phases in our study increased the number of laps walked for 4 to 5 participants. Similarly, the original study also had 5 participants, 4 of them showing significant increase. We did have a variety of limitations for our study. These included adverse weather conditions, and those ranged from blizzards to rainy days and even heat. We had a lot of technology issues with the Map My Walk application. Also, just phones dying and not taking accurate data. 2 of our participants did have medical conditions that interfered with both their baseline and intervention phases. And also the intervention design altogether had its limitations. One of those being carrying 100 physical tokens with us on a walk. And also implementing a reinforcement on yourself was found difficult for some of our participants.